The night was cold, and the wind moved like a whisper through the empty valley. A lone human man walked back to his camp, carrying supplies on his shoulder. He was tired, his boots heavy with dust. But his heart still strong. That was when he saw an alien woman standing in the shadows of broken stones. Her body shook as if every breath was painful, her skin pale and glowing faintly in the moonlight. Looked fragile like cracked glass. Her eyes were large and filled with sorrow. Deeper than anything he had ever seen, she stepped forward, almost falling, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Please, bury me alive," she whispered, her words cutting the silence like a blade. The human froze. Unsure if he had heard correctly, he looked at her thin arms, torn clothing, and a face that carried both beauty and despair. "Why would you ask such a thing?" he said, his voice low but steady. The alien woman lowered her gaze, tears slipping down her cheeks. "My people do not want me," she said, her voice breaking. "They say I am cursed, empty, worthless. A woman who cannot give children." Her hands shook as she pressed them against her chest, as if hiding a wound no one could see. "They cast me out. They told me the only honor left is to bury myself alive." The human's heart pounded, anger rising at the cruelty he heard. He had seen suffering before, but never such hopeless words spoken with calm surrender. He shook his head, refusing to move closer to the shovel that lay near his pack. "You are not cursed," he said firmly, "and I will not bury you." The alien woman looked up, her eyes wide, as if no one had ever said those words to her. "You must," she insisted, her voice louder now, filled with desperate fear. "If I return without burial, they will hunt me, they will laugh, they will make me suffer until I die anyway." Her voice trembled, but her body stood stiff like stone. Ready for rejection, the human took a step forward, his boots crushing dry leaves beneath him. He could feel her pain like a heavy weight in the air. Yet he also saw something else, something hidden behind the tears. There was still a spark of life inside her, a spark she was too broken to see. "Tell me your name," the human said softly. The woman hesitated, as if the question was strange, unnecessary. Finally, she whispered, "They called me nothing. They called me failure. But my true name is Lyra." Her voice cracked, as if saying her own name hurt her heart. "Lyra," the human repeated, letting the name roll from his lips like it mattered. The alien woman's eyes flickered with surprise, as though hearing her name spoken kindly was impossible. "You want to die, but I see someone still alive," he said, his tone sharp with conviction. Her lips parted, but no words came. Only silence carried by the cold wind. He set down his supplies and walked closer. For a moment, she stepped back, fear flashing across her face. Perhaps she thought he would harm her as others had done before, but instead, he simply placed a blanket around her trembling shoulders. "You don't need a grave," he said, his voice strong yet gentle. "What you need is warmth, food, and a chance to live again." Lyra's hands clutched the blanket, her thin fingers gripping it as if it might vanish. Her tears fell silently, each drop catching the faint glow of the moon. "You don't understand," she whispered, shaking her head. "My people will never allow me peace. Even if I survive, I am already dead." To them, her voice was sharp with bitterness, heavy with hopeless truth. The human leaned down slightly, meeting her gaze with unshaken strength. "Then let them think you are dead," he said, his eyes blazing with quiet fire. "But as long as I am here, you live." The silence after those words felt heavy, yet powerful. Lyra's chest rose and fell rapidly, as if struggling to breathe under the weight of his defiance. She wanted to argue, to scream, to demand her burial. But instead, her lips trembled and her legs gave out, collapsing into the dust. The human caught her before she hit the ground, his arms strong, steady, protective. She looked up at him, her vision blurred with tears, her lips trembling. Why? She whispered weakly, "Why would you stop me from ending this pain?" The human looked down at her, his jaw set, his eyes fierce yet kind. "Because I refuse to bury hope," he said firmly. "And whether you believe it or not, you are hope." Lyra's eyes widened, and for the first time, she did not speak. Her body trembled in his arms, her mind caught between despair and something she could not name. The human lifted her gently, carrying her toward his camp under the silent stars. Her request for a grave had been denied. But something far more dangerous had begun. A new bond, fragile, yet unbreakable, had been planted that night, and though Lyra did not know it yet, her plea for death had set her on the path to life. The fire burned low in the human's camp, its light flickering across the rocky walls. Lyra sat close to the flames. Wrapped in the blanket he had given her, her thin frame shaking. The human, named Marcus, sat opposite her, his eyes calm but sharp, watching every move she made. For a long time, there was only silence, the sound of fire crackling, the wind howling, and her quiet breaths. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice steady but gentle. "You asked me to bury you alive. But I won't do that. Not unless I understand why you want it." Lyra lowered her eyes, her hands clutching the blanket as if it was the only thing keeping her together, her lips pressed tight, her mind fighting with the choice whether to speak or stay silent forever. At last, she whispered, "You would not understand." No human could. Marcus leaned forward, his voice stronger. "Try me." Her chest rose and fell, her heart pounding as painful memories pushed against her walls. She swallowed hard, her voice trembling as she began to speak. "In my world, a woman is nothing if she cannot give children," she said, her words cutting the night like knives. "They tested me when I was young. They told me my body was broken. They laughed at me." Her hands trembled as she spoke, her nails digging into the fabric of the blanket. "They called me useless, cursed, a burden. They said my only value was to die so others could forget me." Marcus clenched his fists, his jaw tightening, but he stayed silent, letting her pour her heart out. Lyra's eyes glistened with tears, her voice breaking as the memories dragged her deeper into pain. "They gave me no place, no family, no future. I became a shadow wandering between villages, always mocked, always spit on." Her lips quivered. "Children threw stones at me. Elders told me to hide my face. Men whispered that I was poison." Her voice cracked, but she forced herself to continue. "Once, I tried to fight back. I told them I had worth even without a child, but they laughed. They said my voice meant nothing, that my words were like dust carried by the wind." Her shoulders shook, her breath unsteady. That day, I stopped speaking for many seasons. Silence was easier than their cruelty. Marcus's eyes burned with quiet anger, not at her, but at the cruelty she had endured. He wanted to reach across the fire, to take her hand, but he knew she was fragile, so he simply said, "And that is why you asked me to bury you alive." Lyra's eyes flickered up at him, her expression hollow. "Yes, because I was already buried by them. I just wanted the ground to finish what they started." The fire popped, a small ember shooting into the night sky. Marcus stared at her, his voice low but firm. "They told you lies, and you believed them?" Her lips twisted in pain. "Lies." "No, Marcus. It was truth. Every look, every word, every blow they gave me was truth." Her tears slid down her cheeks, but Marcus leaned closer, his voice strong enough to break through. "No, Lyra, their words were poison, but poison is not truth," he said, his tone heavy with conviction. "You still breathe, you still feel. You are alive. That means their judgment does not define you." Her eyes widened as though his words were strange, dangerous, even foolish. No one had ever spoken against her people's judgment before. Not even in whispers. She shook her head, her voice trembling. But I cannot give what they value. Most, I cannot bear life. Marcus's eyes softened, but his voice remained unshaken. Then they are blind to what life truly is, because you are already life. The words struck her like a thunderbolt, her heart racing, her breath caught. For a long moment, she stared at him, torn between anger, disbelief, and something else, hope. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Why do you speak this way, human? Why do you fight for me when even my own blood rejected me?" Marcus leaned back slightly, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. "Because I know what it feels like to be cast aside, to be told you're worthless." His voice grew heavy with memory. "But I also know those voices are liars, and I will not let them bury you, not while I breathe." Lyra's chest tightened, her mind swirling with confusion. She wanted to believe him, yet the weight of years of rejection chained her heart. Her voice cracked, soft as the wind. "If I am not worthless, then what am I?" Marcus's answer was firm, spoken without hesitation. "You are Lyra, and that alone is enough." Her eyes filled with tears again. But this time they were not only of pain. Something unfamiliar stirred inside her chest. Something warm, fragile, terrifying. She clutched the blanket tighter, her mind whispering that it was impossible, yet her heart refusing to let go of his words for the first time in many years. She did not feel completely hollow. The fire burned brighter, as if listening to her broken story and Marcus's defiance. The night carried their voices into the darkness. She had come seeking a grave, but in sharing her past, something had changed. Her hollow chest no longer echoed with only despair. It now carried the faintest whisper of life. Morning light spread across the valley, painting the rocks in pale gold. Marcus was already awake, tending to the fire and preparing food. Lyra sat near the edge of the camp, her blanket wrapped tightly around her, her eyes distant. She still carried the weight of her hollow past, but something inside her had shifted. The night before, Marcus's words had broken through the walls she had built around her heart. She had spoken of pain, of being worthless. And yet he had refused to accept it. Now, sitting there in the warmth of his fire, she could not understand why a human, a stranger, cared more for her than her own people ever did. Her stomach growled softly, and Marcus turned his head, catching the sound. "You need food," he said simply, his tone more like a command than a suggestion. Lyra's cheeks flushed with shame. "I don't deserve it," she whispered. Lowering her gaze, Marcus frowned, his jaw tightening. "Everyone deserves to eat, Lyra," he said, sliding a small plate toward her. The food was simple roasted roots and a bit of dried meat, but to her it felt like a feast. She hesitated, staring at the plate, her trembling fingers hovering above it. In her old life, she was often denied food, left hungry as punishment. Taking this plate felt strange, almost forbidden. But Marcus gave her a sharp look, one that dared her to refuse. Finally, she picked it up and took a small bite, her eyes filling with tears as warmth spread through her empty stomach. Marcus watched her silently, his heart heavy with anger at what she had endured. Every small movement she made told him how broken she had been, how starved of kindness. When she finished, she looked at him cautiously, as if expecting him to ask for something in return. Instead, he said nothing, only smiled faintly, and began cleaning his tools. Lyra frowned, confused. "Why? Why do you do this?" she asked softly. Marcus glanced at her. "Do what?" "Help me," she whispered, her voice shaking. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything, and yet you give me food, warmth, even words that no one else dared to say." Her eyes narrowed, suspicion creeping in. "What do you want from me, human?" Marcus set down his knife, his expression calm but serious. "I want nothing," he said firmly. "I just don't believe in letting someone die when I can help them live." His voice carried strength, but there was also something hidden. Wound of his own that he did not yet share. Lyra's heart raced, her mind struggling to understand a kindness without price. No one gives without wanting something back. She whispered bitterly. Marcus's lips curved into a small smile. "Then maybe you've just met your first exception." His words left her silent, her chest tightening with confusion and fear. Kindness was more terrifying than cruelty had the power to break the walls she had built for survival. Hours passed, and the two walked through the valley together. Marcus searching for herbs and wood. Lyra followed quietly, still weak, but trying to keep up. Her eyes studied him in secret, the way his broad shoulders carried weight, the way his steps were firm. He moved like someone who had seen hardship, yet his gaze held light she had never seen before. At one point, her foot caught a stone, and she stumbled. Marcus reached out instantly, catching her wrist before she could fall. Lyra gasped, her body tensing as his hand gripped hers. For a heartbeat, she expected pain, a strike. A push button instead. He steadied her gently, then let go. Her chest thudded painfully. Not with fear, but with something else. Something unknown, she whispered, almost to herself. "You don't hurt me." Marcus glanced back at her, his eyes steady. "I never will." The words struck her harder than any blow could have. Promises like that had never been spoken to her before. That night, as the fire burned low again, Lyra sat across from Marcus in silence. She stared at him, her thoughts swirling like a storm. Finally, she asked, "Why do you fight so hard for me? You could have walked away, left me to my grave, but you chose not to. Why?" Her voice cracked with the weight of the question. Marcus looked into the flames, his jaw tight, his expression unreadable. "I've lost people before," he said quietly. "I've seen lives thrown away because others decided they weren't worth saving." His voice grew rough, heavy with memory. "I swore I would never let it happen again if I could stop it." Then he lifted his gaze to hers, his eyes burning. "And I will not let it happen to you." Lyra's breath caught, her heart hammering against her chest. She tried to look away, but his words anchored her, pulling her deeper into something she did not understand. For so long she had been told she was empty, worthless, a failure. Yet this man, this human, looked at her as if she was worth everything. Her lips trembled, and before she could stop herself, she whispered, "Marcus, if you keep looking at me like that, I might believe you." The words hung in the air, fragile and dangerous. Marcus's face softened, his expression filled with quiet strength. "Then believe me, Lyra," he said simply. "Because I mean every word." The night grew colder. Akesa, but Lyra did not feel the chill as she sat near the fire. Her heart was trembling with fear and warmth all at once. She had asked for a grave, but instead she had found a bond forming between herself and the human. A bond strange, fragile, yet stronger than any chain she had ever known. The firelight flickered against the stone walls, painting long shadows that danced around them. Lyra sat quietly, her knees pulled to her chest, staring into the glowing embers. Marcus sat across from her, sharpening his blade slowly, the steady sound echoing in the silence, though she did not speak. Her heart was heavy with thoughts she had never dared to carry before. For the first time in her life, someone had told her she was worth more than the grave her people had chosen for her. It made her chest ache, as if her heart had been frozen for years and was only now beginning to thaw. She felt afraid of that warmth, afraid it might vanish the way everything else had. Yet every time Marcus looked at her, every time his voice cut through her despair, she felt something impossible. "Hope, Marcus," she said suddenly, her voice trembling in the night air. He looked up, his eyes calm but focused. "Yes." She swallowed hard. her fingers clutching the fabric of her blanket. "Why do you care if I live or die? You don't even know me." Her words came out broken, almost like an accusation. Marcus set down his blade, his expression steady. "Because life is not something to throw away, not yours, not anyone's." Lyra shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. "But my life has no value. My people made that clear. I cannot give them children. I cannot fulfill what they see as my purpose. So what am I but empty?" Her voice cracked, echoing the poison of years of rejection. But Marcus leaned forward, his gaze sharp, his tone filled with iron. "You are more than their chains, more than their narrow vision. You are alive, Lyra, and that is enough." His words carried a weight she had never heard before, as if his voice itself was breaking. The curse they had placed on her, she blinked rapidly, her tears falling freely. Alive, yes. But alive for what? To be mocked? To be cast aside? Her voice wavered, but Marcus did not flinch. "To live for yourself," he said firmly. "To live because you deserve the chance to choose your own path, not theirs." Her breath caught, her chest trembling as she stared at him. "No one has ever spoken to me this way," she whispered, her voice cracking like fragile glass. Marcus's eyes softened, but his voice remained steady. "Then let me be the first, and not the last." Silence stretched between them, but it was no longer heavy with despair. It was thick with something else, something new possibility. Lyra pressed a hand against her chest, feeling the thud of her own heart. It was weak, unsteady, but it was still there, still beating, and for the first time she thought it might have meaning. Marcus stood, walking closer, and crouched down beside her. He reached out, not touching her, but holding his hand close enough that she could, if she wanted. "You don't have to believe me right away," he said softly, "but one day you will. Because I will prove it to you." Her lips trembled, her eyes locking onto his hand, slowly with hesitation that made her fingers shake. She lifted her hand and placed it against his. Warmth spread through her skin, shooting up her arm, flooding her chest in a way that almost made her gasp. She had been touched before, but only with cruelty, with rejection, with pain. This touch was different. It carried safety, strength, and something more. Her tears fell silently, and she whispered, "What if I cannot give you what others would give? What if I fail you too?" Marcus shook his head, his grip steady. "I do not want what others wanted. I only want you, Lyra, as you are." Her chest heaved, her heart pounding, each word breaking apart the chains inside her. It was terrifying. This gift of hope he was forcing into her hands. She pulled back slightly, afraid, her voice shaking. "I don't know how to accept this, Marcus. I don't know how to live when I was only taught to die." Marcus's eyes softened, but his voice held no weakness. "Then let me teach you," he said simply. "Let me show you what it means to live, not for them, but for yourself and for us." The words made her breath catch us. She repeated softly, as if the idea was too impossible to believe. Her eyes widened, trembling with a mixture of fear and something dangerously close to longing. He nodded once, firmly. "Yes, us. Because I will not leave you to face this world alone." Her lips parted, but no words came, her heart too full, her mind too shaken. That night, she lay close to the fire, her back against the hard stone, but her mind could not rest. His words echoed over and over in her thoughts, each one striking her deeper than the last. She pressed her hand against her chest, feeling her heart still racing, still alive. For the first time since her exile, she whispered to herself, "Maybe I don't want the grave." Marcus, watching her from across the fire, allowed himself a small smile. He knew the battle was not over, but he had seen the spark ignite in her eyes. It was faint, fragile, but it was hope, the kind of hope that could change everything. and he silently swore to protect that fragile flame until it became a fire she could never lose again. The days passed slowly, each one weaving a strange new rhythm into Lyra's life. She was no longer wandering the cold valleys alone, no longer seeking the comfort of the grave. Now she walked beside Marcus, the human who refused to let her fall into darkness. He spoke little, but every word he gave her was sharp with truth and heavy with meaning. She found herself watching him when he did not notice, the way his strong arms carried heavy loads, the way his eyes scanned the horizon as if always guarding. He never treated her as weak, though he knew her body trembled with hunger and exhaustion. Instead, he guided her without forcing, offering her strength when her legs failed, but never taking her dignity away. It was new, frightening, and yet she found herself leaning on him in ways she never thought possible. One evening, as the sky blazed with orange light, Marcus sat sharpening his blade again. Lyra sat nearby, her eyes fixed on the fire, her thoughts heavy. At last she whispered, "Marcus, why do you do this for me? Why do you fight so hard to keep me alive?" Her voice shook with fear, as though she was terrified of the answer. Marcus looked up, his expression calm, but his eyes burning with something strong. "Because I made a promise to myself long ago," he said slowly, "a promise that I would never let another life be thrown away if I could stop it." He paused, his jaw tightening, his gaze drifting toward the flames. "I lost someone once, someone I cared for, because no one else believed they were worth saving. I will not let that happen again." Lyra's breath caught, her heart tightening in her chest. She leaned closer, her eyes searching his face. "Who did you lose?" she asked softly. Marcus's lips pressed into a hard line, the pain in his expression answering more than words could. "Someone who deserved better," he whispered, his voice low. "Someone who never got the chance you now hold." Silence followed, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Lyra's throat tightened, guilt rising inside her. "Then why give that chance to me? I am broken. I cannot give you what others could. I cannot." Her voice failed, trembling as her tears threatened to fall. But Marcus leaned forward, his voice firm and steady. Cutting through her despair, "Lyra, I don't want what they demanded from you. I don't need children or proof of your worth," he said, his eyes locked on hers. "I want you, just you, alive, breathing, walking beside me. That is enough." His words shook her, pulling down the last defenses she had tried to hold. She stared at him, her lips trembling. "No one has ever wanted me for just me." Marcus's expression softened, but his tone was fierce. "Then let this be the first time, and know this: if the whole world calls you worthless, I will stand against it. I promise you that." Her chest heaved as the weight of his vow settled deep inside her. It terrified her to believe him, yet her heart clung to every word as if they were air. That night, she lay near the fire, but she could not sleep. Marcus's promise echoed in her mind. Louder than the whispers of her people, she pressed her hand against her chest, feeling her heartbeat race faster than ever before. It felt fragile, but also lively in a way she never thought she could be. The next morning, trouble came as the sun rose. Distant voices echoed through the valley, harsh and cruel. Lyra froze, her body trembling as recognition pierced her chest. Her people hunters sent to ensure she had obeyed her honor. Death had found her trail. Marcus's hand immediately went to his weapon, his eyes scanning the horizon. "Who are they?" he asked sharply, though he already saw the fear on her face. "My people," Lyra whispered, her voice cracking. "They must have followed me. They will not allow me to live, Marcus. If they find me, they will drag me back. They will mock you. They will." Her voice broke, tears spilling as she clutched her blanket tighter. Marcus stood tall, his back straight, his eyes blazing with unshaken resolve. "They will not take you," he said firmly, his tone like steel. Lyra stared at him in shock. "You don't understand. There are many. They will hurt you. They." But Marcus raised his hand, silencing her. "I gave you my promise," he said. His voice low and powerful, "and I intend to keep it." The words sent a shiver through her. Stronger than the cold wind that rushed over the valley, he moved toward the entrance of the camp, his body ready for the fight that might come. But he glanced back at her once, his gaze softening for only a heartbeat. "Stay close to me, Lyra. Whatever happens, I will not let them touch you." Her tears fell. Harder. Not only from fear, but from something deeper. Her whole life, she had been told she was worthless. But here was a man ready to fight against an entire people for her. The thought burned inside her. Terrifying and beautiful all at once, as the voices grew louder. Lyra pressed her hand to her chest. Her heart was racing. But this time, it was not only fear, it was something else. Marcus's promise echoed through her, giving her a strength she had never known. For the first time in her life, she whispered to herself, "Maybe I am worth saving." The sound of footsteps grew louder in the valley, echoing like drums of doom. Lyra's body shook, her hands clutching the blanket as her eyes darted toward Marcus. He stood tall near the camp's edge, his blade strapped to his side, his back straight, his gaze unflinching. The voices of her people carried through the cold air, cruel and mocking, reminding her of everything she had tried to escape. "Lyra," a deep voice called, sharp with scorn. "So this is where you hide. So this is how you shame us further." Lyra's chest tightened, her breath catching in her throat. She knew that voice. It belonged to Verone, the elder son, one of the men who had often mocked her weakness. Marcus's hand tightened on the hilt of his blade, but he did not move forward. Not yet. Instead, he glanced at Lyra, his eyes calm but firm, silently telling her that she was not alone. Her people stepped into view, 5 of them, strong, armored. Their eyes filled with disdain. They looked at Marcus first, their lips curling in cruel laughter. A human Varen spat. "Is this what you've chosen, Lyra? A worthless man of another kind to protect a worthless woman?" The others laughed, their voices sharp like knives. Lyra trembled, her voice barely a whisper. "Marcus, they will not stop. They will drag me back. They will." Marcus lifted his hand, silencing her, his eyes locked on the intruders. "Step back," he commanded, his voice low but carrying power. "She is under my protection." The aliens sneered, their laughter echoing through the valley. "Protection," one scoffed. "She deserves no protection. She asked for the grave, and the grave is what she must have." Another added, "Step aside, human. This is not your concern." Marcus stepped forward, his boots firm on the ground, his jaw tight. "It became my concern the moment she asked me to bury her alive, and I refused," he said, his tone like steel. The alien's laughter died, replaced by cold anger. Varen's eyes narrowed, his voice dripping with venom. "You dare stand against us, against her own people, who know her true worth?" Marcus's eyes blazed. "I dare. Because your judgment is worthless, and she is not what you say she is." Lyra gasped softly, her heart pounding at the fire in his voice. The men began to circle, their weapons glinting in the fading light. Lyra's fear rose higher, her body shaking as memories of past humiliation crashed into her mind. But Marcus did not flinch, his stance strong, his gaze steady. For the first time in her life, someone was willing to fight not against her but for her. Varen sneered, raising his weapon. "Then you will die for her, human." Marcus's lips curved into a grim smile. "Then so be it, but I will not move aside." The first blow came fast. One of the men lunged, his blade flashing through the air. Marcus moved with speed, blocking it. Sparks flying as steel clashed against steel. The fight erupted, The valley filled with the sound of metal, grunts and shouts. Lyra froze, her heart racing, every strike tearing through her soul. She wanted to scream, to beg Marcus to run, but her voice stuck in her throat. Instead, she watched, trembling, as the human fought with a fury she had never seen. One man fell back, his arm cut. Another staggered as Marcus's blade caught him across the chest. But there were too many, and they pressed harder. Their strength fueled by cruelty. Lyra's tears spilled down her cheeks. Her mind screaming, "This is my fault. He fights because of me. He bleeds because of me." Her knees hit the ground, her body shaking. But then something changed inside. She looked at Marcus, blood on his arm but fire still in his eyes. Refusing to step aside, and in that moment, she saw it. He was not just fighting, he was defying. He was saying with every strike that her life mattered. The chains of her past snapped, one by one, under the weight of his defiance. Her tears dried. Her fear turned to something else, strength. "No," she whispered, her voice growing louder. "No more." She pushed herself up, her body trembling but her eyes fierce. Varen turned. "Before I am not cursed," she shouted, her voice echoing in the valley. "I am Lyra, and I choose life." The words struck like thunder, silencing even the men who mocked her. Her chest rose and fell, her hands clenched at her sides, her eyes blazing with new fire. Marcus glanced at her, and in his gaze she saw pride. The men faltered, taken aback by her defiance, their grip on their weapons shaking. Varen sneered, but his voice was less certain. "You dare defy your own people?" "Yes," Lyra cried, "I dare. Because I am not theirs to command anymore." Her voice carried across the valley. Cutting through the night like a blade, Marcus stepped beside her, his bloodied blade still. Ready, his voice firm. "She has chosen, and I will stand with her." Together, they faced the men. Human and alien woman side by side. It was no longer just his fight, was theirs. A battle for life, for freedom, for hope. The men hesitated, anger twisting with doubt. For the first time, Lyra saw fear in their eyes, not of Marcus alone, but of her voice, her defiance. The night air trembled with silence. The fight not yet finished, but something had already changed. Lyra was no longer the woman begging for a grave. She was alive. And she had chosen to stay alive. The night after the battle was silent. The valley holding its breath. Marcus stood tall, though his arm was cut and bruised. His blade still at his side. Lyra sat near the fire, her body trembling, but her eyes alive with new fire. Her people had left, defeated not only by Marcus's strength, but by her own voice. Her defiance, for the first time she had shouted her name, claimed her right to live. The words still echoed in her heart, giving her courage where once there had only been despair. Marcus knelt beside her, cleaning the cut on his arm without complaint. She looked at him, her lips trembling. "You fought for me. You bled for me. Why?" Marcus lifted his gaze, his eyes calm but fierce. "Because you are worth fighting for, Lyra," he said firmly, "and I promised you I would not let them bury you." Her tears welled, spilling down her cheeks, not from sorrow this time, but from something deeper. She pressed her hand against his, whispering, "I asked for a grave, but you gave me life." Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Together they traveled far from the valley, building a new life away from the cruelty of her people. Marcus taught her how to survive, how to hunt, how to laugh again. Slowly, she shed the chains of her past, though the scars remained within. At first, she was cautious with every smile, every moment of peace. But Marcus never let her fall, never let her believe she was worthless. His promise was not just words, it was action, steady and strong each day, and little by little, she began to believe. One evening, as the stars shone bright across the endless sky, Lyra sat close to Marcus. Her hand trembled as she rested it over her stomach, her heart pounding. She had felt it for days, the strange warmth. The stirring within her body she thought impossible. Her lips parted, fear and wonder mixing as tears filled her eyes. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Something is happening to me." He turned quickly, his eyes filled with concern. "What is it? Are you hurt?" She shook her head, her hand pressing harder against her belly. "No, not hurt." "Alive," she whispered. "There is life inside me." Marcus froze, his eyes widening, his breath catching. For a moment, the world seemed silent, only the stars above listening to her trembling words. "Lyra," he whispered, his voice soft but filled with awe. "You mean?" She nodded, tears streaming, her lips trembling with both joy and disbelief. "They said I could never bear children. They called me empty, cursed," she whispered, her voice cracking. "But here, now, because of you, because you gave me hope, there is life." A child, Marcus. A child. Her body shook as sobs broke free. But this time, they were not the sobs of despair. They were the cries of a woman who had been given back her worth. Marcus reached out, his hand trembling as it rested gently on her belly. He felt the warmth beneath his palm, and his eyes softened, tears gathering in his own. "You asked me for a grave," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "But instead, fate gave you this." His lips curved into a small smile. "A child, Lyra. Your future, our future." She leaned into him, her tears wetting his chest, her voice breaking. "You gave me more than life, Marcus. You gave me a reason to live. You gave me a family." Her heart swelled with emotions she could not name, a mix of fear, joy, and love. She whispered again, trembling, "I was ready to die. But you gave me something worth living for." The months that followed were filled with change. Her belly grew round, her steps slower. But Marcus was always there beside her, steady and protective. Every night he kept watch. Every day he worked to keep her safe, and every time she looked at him, her heart reminded her that she was no longer alone. The memory of her people still haunted her dreams, but it no longer chained her. She had broken free the night she shouted her name, and now the child within her was proof that her life had value. She had once believed she was cursed, but now she carried a blessing. Her hands often rested on her stomach, and she whispered, "You will not be born into shame. You will be born into love." When the day of birth finally came, Marcus stood by her side, his hand clasping hers tightly. The pain was great, her body trembling, but she no longer feared death, because she knew what she was bringing into the world was proof of her survival, her strength, and his promise. Hours later, the cry of a newborn filled the small home they had built together. Lyra wept, cradling the tiny child against her chest, her tears spilling endlessly. The little one's skin was soft, its cry loud and alive. Marcus leaned close, his eyes shining with pride and love. Lyra looked at him, her voice breaking with joy. "I asked to be buried alive, but instead, you gave me a baby. You gave me life." Marcus kissed her forehead gently, whispering, "No, Lyra. You gave yourself life. I only reminded you to hold on to it." She smiled through her tears, holding both the child and his hand tightly. Her heart finally understood what it meant to be alive, not just to exist, but to love, to hope, and to belong. And as the firelight warmed their little home, Lyra knew that the grave she once sought had become a cradle of life instead.